Could there be greener pastures for Jon Sumrall before this season's over? Can the Saints survive Seattle? We got all those questions to answer and so much more on this edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. All right, welcome to the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in. As always, if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and give this podcast a follow on Spotify. That way you don't miss a single solitary episode. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. That's where you can find us. Also, make sure you check us out on social media as well. Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're all there. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour. It's just that simple. And I want to start things off with a little bit of a conversation about the Tulane Green Wave, because I feel like they are an underrated part of the headlines when it comes to this football season so far. I understand we're not even a month into the season, but when you see what Jon Sumrall has done with this Green Wave team, especially based off of what we've seen the last few years with Tulane, they've continued to escalate and elevate their play. You got to kind of think that this may be a stopgap for Jon Sumrall sooner rather than later, especially when you see some of the jobs that are starting to come available even after only 3 weeks of the season. You have, UCLA, they fired their head coach, and Virginia Tech followed suit the same day on a Sunday. Definitely was a little bit of a surprise, but, taking Virginia Tech out of the conversation, I think there's some other jobs that are going to become available before long. I think one of them, and we'll talk about that team a little bit later on, has to be the Florida Gators. Simply because Billy Napier has not delivered to the level of expectation I think a lot of Florida fans want. And again, Florida has been on this run the last decade where they look really good. They look to be back to that level they were back in the mid to late 2000s, or even going further back to the 90s, but then they begin to regress back towards the mean for one reason or another. And then they fire the coach. It's lather, rinse, repeat, and we've seen it happen over the last decade. Jim McElwain, remember when he got that team, if I'm not mistaken, to an SEC championship game not too long ago? Dan Mullen, same thing. Did not work out long term or long enough, because these Florida fans can get very fickle, and more importantly, get very much are wanting that instant gratification. And instant gratification is great, but at the same time, that's not how you're going to kind of build for the long term and build for the future of your program. I think they should give Billy Napier a little bit more rope, but at the same time, you got to think before this season's over, if they continue to kind of be towards where a Vanderbilt was before Diego Pavia was a thing, you would see him kind of being a persona non grata before the season's over. I understand Scott Strickland said that he was going to not going to let him go after the season. He was going to let it play out and then move forward to 2026. Mainly because that buyout is too big. But at the same time, if somebody in the state of Florida or a Florida booster wants to drum up some money to help pay off some of that, I could completely get behind that theory. That said, I'm sure there are a lot of other programs that are going to be looking for a head coaching seat in the NCAA before too long, because this season is very much like a lot of stuff can still happen. Everybody wants to say fire. It's amazing to me how in 2025 people are still talking about getting rid of one Brian Kelly, even though he's 3-0. Make it make sense to me. Oklahoma State's a team that could definitely be in there, mainly because Gundy's been there a long time and it feels like things haven't gone the way you expected. And if they lose that game in Stillwater against Oklahoma, oh boy, it is going to be a struggle bus for that program. Meanwhile, Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, I feel like he's already on the hot seat, mainly because he's having to fill the shoes that were damn near impossible to do. I don't think he gets fired anytime soon because I think they realize, like, hey, we got to give this a minute before he can really have his own and we can say whether or not he has been a good head coach or a bad head coach. He hasn't been able to cook with his ingredients just yet. He's still kind of finding himself in a way. And I'm hoping he gets his act together in a sense because honestly, LSU, Alabama, not having that be a marquee matchup between top 25 teams doesn't hit the same as it did in the mid 2010s. Again, that's the good stuff. Like whenever you saw LSU from like 2011 till like 2017, 2018, 2019, that era of LSU Alabama, that was fun. Not these guaranteed wins. It's a lot like the LSU Florida rivalry that everybody talks about. It's like it's been pretty damn one-sided going back to 2010. Since the 2010s, LSU has pretty much had their number. There's been a couple losses in there, but you look at the vast majority of those games, it was utter dominance in that series. It's not like I was back in the 80s and 90s whenever Florida was actually a really good program and LSU was kind of middle of the road. Now it's clear the divide between LSU and Florida. But we're going off track here. But in the case of Jon Sumrall, he is a guy that I think with what he's been able to do with Jake Retzloff, the BYU transfer, he's become a Mr. Everything for that program. I would not be surprised if by the end of the season, there's a coaching vacancy that is readily available. UCLA just fired their head coach. I feel like that's one that should absolutely be at the top of the list. I don't think VT is going to be a part of that at all. I think, Brent Pry, he failed in a big way early on. They decided to move on from him. And according to sources that I was seeing yesterday, that apparently they may be thinking about just bringing back an old alum and Michael Vick. I don't necessarily think that's a great idea. But if UCLA comes a call, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it to the other LA, and we're talking back about Sumrall. I think Sumrall is a great head coach. He's proven himself. I think if not this year, I think next year you see him make a move to leave Tulane simply because money is going to be too good for a coach like that to pass up an opportunity. I like what I've seen from him and this offense. He's been able to do this with a lot of different quarterbacks. He's been able to be consistent. And if the Tulane Green Wave managed to get their stuff together, especially in this game on Saturday, I'm almost certain that if he wins that game, there's going to be some head coaches calling. I'm telling you, Sumrall may be getting a call from the 2-1-3 if they pull off this upset against Ole Miss. I don't necessarily see it happening, but a competitive ball game will definitely get a lot of people's eyes focused over in New Orleans, and it's sure as heck not about the NFL team. This would be what's going on at Yeoman Stadium. Speaking of those New Orleans Saints, they have another tough game. And on the road, no less. The first road game for Spencer Rattler in 2025. And it's in the home of the 12th man. I understand that this is not Seattle of the mid-2010s. When Marshawn Lynch ran Beastquake all over you, the Legion of Boom was bringing it every single game. And the crowd was rocking every single time. The home of the 12th man in the NFL. Obviously, Texas A&M has their own claim to it. Despite the fact they're cold, I'll just acknowledge that. But when you look at this matchup against the Saints in Seattle, I feel like this may be one of those opportunities to sneak away with the win. Why do I say that? Because I don't think Seattle's a beatable team. Again, this is the same team that struggled mightily against the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers, who the Seahawks have had to play in that division. So you've gone through the entire NFC West like you're back in the early 2000s when Kurt Warner was leading the Rams to the Super Bowl. This is how far back we're going here. It's like you got a damn NFC West gauntlet right out the gate. Now, you got the Seahawks. Seahawks lost to the 49ers, but then they whipped up on the Steelers, who are just kind of all over the place with Aaron Rodgers and whatever drugs he was on in that game. But I feel like this Seahawks team, I think there's a good shot that the Saints could come away with a win here. Mainly because sooner or later, the ball's got to bounce your way. I understand that you look at what this Saints team has done in the first 2 weeks. The procedural penalties are going to kick your ass every single time. And it sucks to see that the last 2 games, you've had a ton of procedural penalties, just death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, he had 13 in week 1 alone. So you have to kind of clean that up, and hopefully it starts to get better in week 3. But in very hostile enemy territory, that's going to be a challenge for this team, especially in the offensive line. Losing more depth at safety, that's going to hurt you up against a pretty decent offense. So I think I would give a mild edge to the Saints, and it might be just some bias here, but I'm not necessarily sure I'm sold on what we see with the Seahawks, especially at the quarterback situation. Sam Darnold's looked a little bit better, but still, it's Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is a lot like Bo Nix when he was at Auburn. You had the good Bo, who was godlike, and then you had bad Bo. And bad Bo showed up a lot more often than good Bo until he wound up going to Oregon, and he's managed to turn his career around and look like a very serviceable quarterback in the NFL, mainly because of one Sean Payton. And now we kind of look at this. I think I want to look more into an in-depth preview of this game. Might get into that more on tomorrow's pod, but just right here, right now, if I were to answer the question about can the Saints survive the game against Seattle and come away with a win, I feel like I'd probably say this is like a 62% chance of winning. I think you have to have the ball bounce the right way, but more importantly, I think this is another opportunity for Spencer Rattler. It's going to be a close ball game, but I think it's time for the Rattlesnake to show he's got ice running through the veins, because he hasn't shown that in this season so far. I'm hoping he can kind of get it back on track, but he hasn't shown it at this point, because you have 2 games in a row where you've got an opportunity to get a game-winning drive and show off that you got the clutch gene. Well, that clutch gene ain't showing up. You can't have that happen over the course of 17 games and expect to win. You got to put it in your own hands and handle business. The offensive line has to step up, and they have tried out a few guys, and hopefully they can figure out what they want to do with the offensive line and get that better, because I keep saying it, and I'll keep saying it until somebody finally listens to me and tell you that you have to have a great offensive line in order for your offense to start flowing. They looked decent last week. Rattler looked a lot better, but in the moments where it counted, the offensive line let him down. Some other news to kind of get to on today's podcast. I got to bring this up because this is crazy. The assistant coach for Florida football, he got suspended 3 games for his part in the actions of the pregame scuffle between LSU and Florida. And that is one Jabbar Jaluk, who was a coach at LSU. I think people kind of forget that. You know, Jabbar Jaluk was part of the LSU staff as a running backs coach and was really good in the recruiting front alongside a guy like Frank Wilson. That program, he moved over to the Cajuns to take over and help out with Billy Napier, and that wound up paying off massive dividends. You go look back at those recruiting classes that Napier had with the Cajuns, considering the time of era it was, he was handling business. And Jabbar Jaluk, I think without a doubt, is one of the guys you have to give a ton of credit for when it comes to the recruiting trail. He knew what he was doing. Obviously, he wound up sticking around Billy Napier and being part of the University of Florida, but it's fun to me to see that we're having this. I understand, and the conduct is unacceptable for a head coach to be involved in a scuffle like that before the game, and they're supposed to de-escalate these kind of situations. But at the same time, it furthers the lore, especially very recent lore, about this LSU-Florida rivalry. I talked about it earlier. LSU and Florida doesn't necessarily like instill the same energy as LSU Alabama in the mid 2010s, but everybody loves that series between LSU and Florida. It's always a big game. Every mark's on the calendar. I'd say almost like the Ole Miss game. Now that said, LSU Florida has just been one of those where there's always something that we talk about after that game for weeks, months, and maybe years. I don't think there's going to be a single LSU fan that won't be talking about the shoe game. All these years later, we're still going to be talking about that game. There's probably a litany of games that we're going to talk about when it comes to LSU Florida. Maybe not in the same regards as the 9-6 game against LSU Alabama in 2011, but it's just one of those where you can feel that there's some true hatred between these two programs. It's not just, oh, hey, these games were instant classics. It's not like Iron Bowls of the past. It's just, oh, hey, these two teams just hate each other, and it's fun as hell to watch. And it's just another log on the fire in my mind. And hopefully we get to see more of those kind of moments and we get to see that just hatred between these two teams. Because it's safe to say, like, I was amazed there was not like a pregame warning. It was just, oh, hey, move on. But trust me, we are going to not be afraid to throw some yellow hankies out there before too long. And I'm going to wrap up the pod with this one simply because it's crazy to think about this. Monty Duplantis, in 2025, he continues to break his own records. Get this. He's won his 49th straight game. Listen to me. 49th straight contest, earning himself $70,000 in Japan. Jam-packed stadium, and set another world record, 6.3 meters. Are you kidding me? This man, third world championship of his career, 14th time he's broken a world record. I keep saying about him, he's a lot like one of those kids back in the day, whenever you used to go to the arcades, back when arcades existed, back when you go to the mall on a Saturday, go hang out at Aladdin's Castle or whatever your arcade was named back at the Gap. You had all the high scores, and they all had the same initials. Duplantis is literally that kid, but with actual sports, and it is amazing to see what he's doing because he is clearing the bar higher and higher and higher. 6.3 meters, that's about 20 feet, bro. Like, you are, like, I would never consider doing that. But whenever you are a generational athlete, I know Ryan Clark, he talked a lot about a couple weeks ago and got in some hot water about generational talents. There's no doubt in my mind that Duplantis is a generational talent in his game, in his sport, and that is track and field and the pole vault. And that's saying something because that whole family is filled with talent. I mean, his brother, Antoine Duplantis, the hit king of LSU. But Duplantis has been the one to continue to make a lot of headlines. And he kind of redeemed himself because he performed at the Japan National Stadium during the COVID Olympics. No crowds. He wound up just getting the gold medal. But this time he got what he was wanting the whole time. That was getting another world record. And it was nothing short of impressive to see him do that. And getting the $100,000 bonus definitely is pretty nice. And that goes alongside probably all the endorsements because that's the thing, and that's probably the biggest reason why Monty Duplantis, even though he's from Louisiana, his mother's from Sweden, the biggest reason why he took the opportunity to go to Sweden was because he is treated like a literal rock star. Basically, just as a comparison, I feel like Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, those guys, that's what Monty Duplantis is to the people in Sweden. He is a rock star and a half, and they treat him like a god. And it's justified whenever you're doing this kind of stuff consistently. It's almost every single time I see a Monty Duplantis headline, it's about him breaking another record. He started breaking records all the way back in 2020, 5 years ago, after he left LSU, after being part of the track and field team over there, and he's broken it on 3 different continents. 9 countries. Bro, leave some for the rest of us. And the crazy part is he's 25 and he's eyeing 6.5 meters. That is some insane things. I can't fathom doing 6.5 meters in the air. That's about 21 feet, by the way, if you don't want to do the math about that. But that is some insane stuff this young man is doing, and more power to him. He can enjoy all those 20 feet. I'll stay on ground level with you and appreciate you listening to this podcast. Make sure you go check us out and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. That way you don't miss a single solitary episode. And also, go ahead and follow us on all social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call that. YouTube as well. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour. You get it. You got it. Good. I'll talk to you tomorrow on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast.